Today's a great victory. It's a great victory for Sean Combs. It's a great victory for the jury system. You saw that the Southern District of New York prosecutors came at him with all that they had. They're not stopping, but one thing stands between all of us and a prison, and that is a jury of 12 citizens.
Diddy may have been acquitted of some pretty big charges at his criminal trial, but he still was convicted of 2. So what's next for him in terms of sentencing, his finances, facing a wave of lawsuits, including a brand new one from a former exotic dancer who claims Diddy drugged and assaulted him, caused him to lose teeth and have to get gastric surgery?
Diddy is in full-blown panic mode right now. And honestly, you can't blame him, because the rumor flying around the court system at this point is the last thing he ever expected to hear. After everything he's already dealing with, after the charges, after the investigations, after the raids, after the endless lawsuits, now there are whispers spreading that the judge overseeing his case might actually extend his prison sentence. Yes, extend it, not reduce it.
After the monumental verdict in the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial, the question now is, what is next for him, right? You got sentencing, civil suits, a lot to get into. So while Combs was acquitted of racketeering conspiracy and the sex trafficking charges that he was facing, he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution. Currently, sentencing is set for October 3rd. However, there is a hearing set for July 8th where the defense will be arguing for the sentencing date to be expedited, to happen sooner. Obviously, they want that, considering Combs was also denied bail yet again, despite arguments from his legal counsel after the verdict that he should be released on bond. It didn't happen. They want to make sure this happens as quickly as possible. But what will he be sentenced to, really? That's the question. And also, will the government seize his assets? What about all of those civil lawsuits that he faces? Again, a lot of questions, a lot to get into. So for all of this, let me bring on former sex crimes prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, the great Matt Murphy is with us. Matt, good to see you.
Happy to be here, as always.
Got to ask you your reaction to the verdict. Is it what you expected?
Well, hearkening back to, I don't know, we were talking about this, you and I, a couple of months ago, and I got to say, whether it's fun to be right or not in a case like this, we were both right. This was never a good fit for RICO for a lot of different reasons. And the consent element regarding the sex trafficking was always problematic. And I thought the prosecution here did a good job presenting their case. They did a good job presenting their theory. But when you match in a trial context, when you match like professorial and kind of plotting, which is the way a lot of government lawyers are, versus dynamic and engaging and that personality of the defense, it's always a mismatch. You're always up against it. And the Mann Act, like we talked about, I thought he was going down on that after like the second day of testimony. The problem is for the prosecution, the Mann Act is a very old law, and it was essentially legislative morality from about 100 years ago, where it was transporting prostitutes across state lines. The intent may have been good. It was essentially a very early version of sex trafficking, but it was really more an attempt to stop prostitution, which is, as we know, never going to happen. So almost every lonely guy in New York City who's going through a divorce, who is having a problem in the dating pool, who has some sex worker drive over from New Jersey, if he buys her Uber or his Uber, theoretically, that's a violation of the Mann Act. So that is it's not the same type of crime. There's no mandatory minimum under federal law. The judge does not have to. Right, they don't have to. Now, it carries up to 10 years per event, so he faces up to 20 years. The prosecution, I think, is asking for 46 months or something like that. They're asking for far less than that.
If they had called, let's say, Christina Coram, okay, this chief of staff who had been mentioned, I think, by almost every witness, and she said, hey, listen, there was a criminal enterprise, okay? We were all a part of it. Everybody knew what the job description was. My job was to do this. His job was to do this. You think they would have gotten racketeering? If they didn't include Jane, who was arguably the more problematic testimony, I mean, Sean Combs still paying her rent, messages that she was setting up a lot of these sexual encounters. Cassie had messages too that were problematic that showed if we're talking about whether she was a willing participant or not. But if you focus just on Cassie and you didn't call in Jane, or you didn't call in a Mia, or you didn't call in a Brianna Bengolan, if you limited the case, and now it's so easy to play, Monday morning quarterback or armchair lawyer here.
Not reconsider it. Not negotiate it. Extend it. And the reason behind this sudden shift? Disturbing new evidence that just landed on the judge's desk. Let's get into this, because the way this is unfolding has Diddy waking up every morning feeling like the floor is collapsing underneath him. His entire legal team is scrambling. His lawyers are calling around the clock. His advisors are telling him to stay calm, but behind the scenes, everyone knows the truth. If this rumor is real, Diddy is screwed on a level he never imagined. Here's what's happening. Sources inside the courthouse are saying the judge has been reviewing new materials connected to Diddy's case, materials that weren't part of the original sentencing, materials that weren't included in the initial hearings, materials that were only discovered because investigators kept digging. And apparently, what they found is so disturbing, so incriminating, so damaging, that there's talk of the judge stepping back in and increasing the punishment. That alone is enough to make Diddy lose his mind. But what has him absolutely terrified is that.
But do you feel that the prosecution could have won this case if they structured it differently, if they called different witnesses?
That's a great question, and that's something that these prosecutors will literally be wondering for the rest of their lives, for the rest of their careers. They're going to be wondering if they'd done it differently, would the impact upon the jury and would the result have been different. The fundamental problem, I think, is that this was kind of always a round peg in a square hole. The arson, that domestic violence video that we all watched, that's horrific. All of that should have been prosecuted as state crimes in Los Angeles. That as a fundamental, starting point.
Well, they couldn't
So
do it now. It
basically,
was time barred.
No, of course, the statute is run on everything.
Yep.
But that would have been, he would have been prosecuted for exactly what he did instead of predicate acts into a RICO theory. Now, RICO, as we know, was designed for essentially mafia organization, for organized crime. And the idea is simply because there's a legitimate business, like in The Godfather, they had a legitimate olive oil importing business, and that was but it was still a criminal enterprise. The real thing was the mafia. The real thing was the organized crime surrounding the Corleone family, to use an example that everybody can probably relate to. So simply because their olive oil importing business was legitimate, that's not a defense to a RICO thing. That's the current state of the law. What they did here is they took a business that was always legitimate, Bad Boy Records, that was always and the purpose is to make music and make money. Everything surrounded that. And the defense argument, which they obviously argued very effectively, was that is not a criminal enterprise. So the very first element of RICO has always been problematic from the very beginning. You and I talked about that 2 months ago when this whole thing started. And and the jury, this was a sober jury that the questions were serious and direct. And, they sent that note out regarding juror 25 right at the very beginning saying, hey, this guy's not deliberating. And so this was a serious group. And the Mann Act, they did convict on that. So they were, by the fact that that it was unanimous meant that they were getting along. Federal juries tend to be, in California anyway, we have, they draw our state juries off the DMV database. That's how you get jury duty, is from the DMV. Federally, it's based on voter rules. So it's people who are conscientious enough to actually vote. And you tend to get a more serious class of juror in federal court, which I think is interesting. So to answer your question, it's something that we could kick around for years.
Sure.
But I think the fundamental problem here is that it was always kind of a misfit for a RICO theory. Just like the sex trafficking, sex trafficking requires fraud, force, or coercion, right? So that essentially is the same elements of rape. So you essentially, it's transporting somebody under circumstances that equate to rape. Is something forceful, something fearful. That it just doesn't fit very well here, especially when you're talking about all these people who they're orbiting him. They're all trying to advance their own career. And when the defense attorney got up and said, Cassie got $30 million, as a result of her settlement, right? And that was a
Yeah.
big move.
Yeah, I wasn't sold for that personally, because I was like, the prosecution came back and be like, she already settled. What's her incentive to come here and lie? You know, what's her incentive to be a part of this? And that for me, but I think the messages, the conduct that arguably
Nobody knows where this evidence came from. Nobody knows who provided it. Nobody knows who flipped. Nobody knows who finally cracked. Because when evidence surfaces late in a high-profile case like this, it usually means one thing: someone close to him opened their mouth. A staff member, a former friend, an ex-employee, somebody who was around during the moments that were supposed to stay buried, suddenly decided to talk. And once one person talks, more follow. That's how these cases explode. And right now, it looks like the explosion is happening. People close to the situation are saying the new evidence doesn't just support the original accusations, it goes beyond them. It adds context. It adds patterns. It adds connections the judge didn't have before. And if a judge believes the behavior was worse than what was initially presented, they have full power to extend the sentence. And that's exactly the nightmare Diddy is facing. Imagine sitting in a prison cell, already trying to survive, already trying to keep your
contradicts someone being a victim. And I know there's complicated factors between an abuser and a victim, the trauma. I get it. I totally understand it. But I wonder if that's what saddled the jury. Okay, I want to move past the verdict because now we have to talk about what's happening next. First thing, when the sentencing hearing is going to happen. So they have this hearing next week about whether to expedite the sentencing, happening before October 3rd. If both sides agree, great. If they don't, what is a compelling legal argument for the defense to say, we want this sentencing to happen much sooner?
Well, I mean, we know that behind the scenes, what they want, of course, is they expect a chance that he's going to be released. So that's their big motivating factor, of course. Whether the court abides by that, I mean, it is a substantial change in circumstance. He was acquitted of all of these serious charges, right?
But he was
Like
just denied bail. He was denied bail again.
he was denied bail again, and I watched. I actually learned that on your segment yesterday afternoon as I was sort of
Yeah.
doing my my preparation for this. But the we have to remember that one of the things that he got in trouble for, that Diddy got in trouble for in jail, was using other inmates' calling number. Remember that? So he was calling witnesses in the case from jail using other inmates. That was a direct affront to that judge. That was remember, we had all those attempts at bail that were denied at the very beginning of the case, one after another after another. This judge, and it's the same judge who's going to sentence him, denied that over and over again. And you and I, again, in another conversation we had on your show, we both said he is screwed now, that he's got no chance because he's violating the rules of the court while in jail. So if he's disobeying the rules of the jail and the directive of the court while he's in custody, how can he be expected to actually follow the terms of a bail agreement when he's out of custody?
Right.
And I think that chicken is coming home to roost again. I mean, I think that's what happened yesterday afternoon. That any judge who has a criminal defendant who behaves like that, that is an affront to the court itself. It's disrespectful to the court. And it's almost like he couldn't get out of his own way there at the beginning. But he had an excellent defense team.
He does. So assuming for a moment, whenever the sentencing hearing happens, right? Let's say it happens in a month from now. Let's say it has October 3rd. The question is, what's his sentence? As we mentioned, the prosecution in a filing from yesterday talked about the guidelines range being 51 to 63 months. Now, this is before a pre-sentencing investigation and report. Now, the defense, right, they want 21 months. He's already served almost 10. Talk to us about what you're thinking here, because there is no minimum. The maximum's 10. If the judge were to combine it together, like you said, 20 years, feels highly unlikely that would happen. As we're talking, what is a pre-sentencing report investigation? How would it affect this? What do you think the judge is going to do? There's so many different factors to consider here, and it's not like a murder case when it's like, okay, we know what's going to happen. It's like life in prison without the possibility of parole. It's a given. There's room here. What do you think the judge is going to do?
So in federal court, this is actually very interesting. They rely very heavily on those pre-sentencing investigations. So essentially what will happen is there'll be a federal probation officer, and they do these for almost every case, where they will do their own investigation, where they'll talk to family members, they'll talk to employers, they'll talk to neighbors, and they will make a recommendation to the court as to suitability for release, suitability for time, And that's something that federal judges traditionally really adhere to. They tend to put a lot of weight on those, far more than they do in state court. The probation department can make a recommendation, but the DA will.
Head down, already dealing with enemies, threats, and attacks, only to find out that your sentence might get longer. Imagine hearing a guard whisper the rumor under his breath. Imagine inmates talking about it before you even hear it from your lawyer. Imagine knowing the judge has the ability to lock you away for years more. That's the fear Diddy is living with right now. His legal team is freaking out because they know this is the worst possible timing. Diddy has already been involved in multiple altercations behind bars. He's already had reports written about his behavior. That does not help him. When a judge is reviewing new evidence, the last thing they want to see is a report saying the defendant is causing trouble, not adjusting, not cooperating. To the court, that screams, no remorse, no progress, no control, no change. And this isn't the kind of rumor you can ignore. This is the kind of rumor that comes from court workers, insiders, and people who have access to the documents nobody else gets to see. People are saying the judge is reviewing
Certainly have more ability, most of the time, to talk a judge in or out of a sentencing recommendation from the probation department. Federal court is different. They really put a lot of weight on those. So that's something that I think is going to be very interesting. And a lot of that will come down to what the individuals involved in that investigation, even though it shouldn't impact their professional recommendation. It's really, I think we're going to see what they thought of the case. Did they think he got away with something horrific here? Did they think that he was getting railroaded from the beginning? I think that may reflect in the recommendation to the court. But of course, we don't know what that is yet. Um, I don't know. If I'm his defense lawyer, I'm kind of I don't know if I am pressing the gas on that, trying to make this thing go faster. I mean, it's coming up. It's coming up soon enough anyway. I would want to give them the time and not press them, because you don't want a probation officer or anybody in the federal system to feel like they're being rushed.
Right.
Because I think it's very easy to just go,
Yeah.
okay, screw it, the guy should stay in.
The prosecution made
But
the
those
point
guys just
yesterday. They said the point, like, we're not ready to give a really sentencing recommendation. We haven't gotten the report. There's people say, well, maybe he'll get time served, right? He's been locked up. There's other people say, no, the judge is going to throw the book at him, even though the judge said yesterday, even though I'm denying him bail and I'm looking at certain conditions, this is not reflective or a preview of what my sentencing recommendation or what my sentence will be. But, are we looking at double digits? Are we looking, you think, at 1 to 5 years, time served? I know it's so impossible to ask, but it is a very specific charges he was convicted of.
Yeah, we're not looking at double digits.
Okay.
I cannot imagine the court imposing that. And remember, because this law is so old, and we're in an age of Uber. So literally, somebody in New York City, a man or a woman who engages the services of a sex worker who lives in New Jersey, and if they pay for their Uber, that technically is a Mann Act violation. Okay, so that is it. It's a morality crime, and that it just does not carry the same weight.
Will the judge say, hey, listen, multiple instances he was doing it, not one Uber, he was doing it multiple times. You have 2 alleged victims here, Cassie, Jane, and violence, right? He used violence as one of the reasons to deny him bail. I wonder if he's going to look at, even though he was acquitted of racketeering and sex trafficking, different characteristics and components of his relationships with Jane and Cassie and say, this is aggravated.
It's a very interesting question. Can the court aggravate nonviolent offenses that he was convicted of, which are the Mann Act violations? Can he aggravate those when he was acquitted of the more serious charges, essentially acquitted of everything that involved violence, threats, all of that sort of thing? So
Right.
it's a very, very interesting legal question.
Real quick, asset forfeiture. What is that exactly? How would it work with Mann Act convictions?
I just don't see the feds having it being on very strong ground to seize a bunch of assets. And here's why, Jesse. Most of the federal cases where you have, especially RICO cases, an actual RICO case is an actual corrupt organization that the purpose is, like I had one in Salt Lake City last year. It was a fraud case where it was one of these calling room scam operations. Every dollar that they made in that, they made out of the bank account of some poor innocent victim who
Yep.
got
Yep.
scooped up in their
Yep.
scheme. So every dollar, everything they bought, every car, every house,
Yeah.
everything that they owned was a direct result
Yeah.
of money that they gleaned from innocent people. Those are the cases, or narcotics. We see this all the
Right.
time in narcotics cases.
Evidence that didn't exist during the original sentencing, evidence that paints an even darker picture than what was already laid out. And if that's true, Diddy is in deeper trouble than he ever imagined. This whole situation hit him like a punch to the chest. One minute he's trying to adjust to prison life, trying to survive behind bars, dealing with threats, fights, warnings, and fear, and then the next minute, he's hearing whispers that his sentence might get longer, that the judge might be preparing to hit him with extra years, that the story isn't even close to over, that everything he thought was locked in is suddenly up in the air again. Imagine being in a cell, already trying to hold yourself together, already trying to keep from breaking down, and then hearing a guard say, "You hear the judge might extend his time?" That's the kind of thing that destroys someone mentally, and that's exactly what's happening right now. The disturbing new evidence that popped up is what changed everything. Nobody knows who brought it forward. Nobody knows who cracked. Nobody knows which person from Diddy's inner circle decided to talk. But
custody. Lack of access to healthy or edible food, which is essential to pre-diabetics. The food that Mr. Combs has survived on includes expired processed pork, chicken, and beef, which on any given day can contain maggots. Lack of physical exercise with weights or any proper equipment. No physical therapy for his several shoulder and knee injuries. No functioning washing machines/dryers. And extreme temperatures, freezing cold or burning hot. Now, after his trial and the dozens of lawsuits he faces, his lawyers argue that his legacy has been destroyed, stating, due to adverse publicity and the allegations which the jury rejected, he faces nearly 100 lawsuits, most of which have been filed by individuals he has never met before, all of which contain made-up claims by individuals seeking to profit from Mr. Combs' downfall. Unfortunately, these lawsuits have involved his family, with his 84-year-old mother being sued in several states by individuals and his sons also being sued alongside Mr. Combs. They go on to write, as bad as life is inside of MDC, Mr. Combs has suffered countless other losses. Since his incarceration and conviction on the Mann Act, these and other collateral consequences to his life have been personally devastating. He has been separated from his family, has mounting legal bills from the indictment and defending lawsuits that were the direct result of the United States Attorney Damian Williams' prejudicial press conference announcing this case, and has lived in MDC for over a year, despite having every intention on fighting this case from day one. His defense attorneys cite other instances where his life has been systematically dismantled. For example, after Cassie's lawsuit and the lawsuits after, his companies were unable to operate as they once were, and he had to let go of over 1,000 employees. Some employees, according to the document, were unable to get new employment because of their past association with the mogul. His federal case has also had devastating consequences for his children. They were canceled and lost business opportunities. The family's Hulu show was canceled after Cassie's lawsuit. He was removed from the boards of 3 charter schools he created. He was stripped of his honorary doctorate degree from Howard University. He was forced to return the key to the city of New York, and he had to step down from his TV network Revolt, which according to the filing was one of 2 black TV networks in the United States. So in all, the defense is hoping the judge sentences him to a 14-month sentence, meaning if the judge sides with him, it's likely he could be out of jail before the holidays. As of this recording, though, prosecutors haven't submitted their recommendations for his sentencing, but they've previously said that he has an extreme history of violence and that the attempts to minimize his conduct show he's still very dangerous. So that was a lot, right? A lot of legalese, a lot of pages to go through. So let's break it down further with none other than criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson-Ferrer. Safa, always great to see you, and thanks so much for joining me. Let's take a little step back. It's almost sentencing time for Diddy. He needs support. The defense sent a bunch of letters, some including from Young Miami, Dallas Austin, Stevie J, the mothers of his daughters Love and Chance, his mom, his sister, all of his kids minus the youngest one. But what did you make of the letters of support?
I'm not surprised to see letters of support here. That's actually pretty typical as sentencing is about to commence, or shortly, at least a week or two before the sentencing commences. And a lot of times defendants and clients will submit letters that are on behalf of family members and loved ones, giving a clearer picture to the judge as to who this person is generally, or who this person is and what they need to their family and their loved ones. And that's a part of what we call a mitigation or sentencing memorandum. that goes to the court in order to get a lesser sentence or to give the judge an idea of this is a good guy, you know, mistakes happen or bad things happen, but he's been reformed, rehabilitated, and we as his family.
Somebody did. Somebody spilled details that weren't in the first set of charges. Somebody provided information that makes the judge question whether the original sentence was too light. And here's where it gets worse. Judges don't like being blindsided. Judges don't like finding out the defendant may have done more than what was presented. Judges don't like feeling misled. And when that happens, they have full authority to go back and revise a sentence. This isn't a joke. This isn't a rumor that came from Twitter. This is coming from people who understand how courts operate. Diddy's legal team is panicking because they know exactly how dangerous this is. They know Diddy has already had multiple incidents in prison, arguments, confrontations, moments where officers had to step in. That makes him look unstable. That makes him look like someone who isn't adjusting, isn't remorseful, isn't changing. And if the judge sees that alongside new evidence, it's a disaster. The prosecution is reportedly thrilled because this gives them another chance to go after him harder. If they can convince the judge the new evidence shows a pattern, a history, or
promised or given, and there were allegations that Combs had made promises of opportunities and so forth to get what he wanted. And he's also charged with count 3, which is related to the transportation of people for purposes of prostitution. Now, quick side note about this. This is a comprehensive indictment, but it doesn't have a lot of details about what evidence prosecutors have to prove all of this. It also doesn't include every allegation that has been asserted against Combs in numerous civil complaints. For instance, there is nothing regarding minors. You know, there's been a lot of allegations that there were minors at these Combs parties, which we had heard before in these other allegations and these other complaints. Nothing about minors here. Now, Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, said that it's possible more charges could be on the way. He wouldn't confirm it one way or another, said nothing's off the table, so we don't know. But maybe there wasn't enough evidence to prove that there were minors at these parties or Combs did anything criminal related to minors. But I tell you what, we did get a lot more information from another filing from the prosecution. I'll get to that in a second. First, I have to get to the defense because in a letter filed with the court on Tuesday, Combs' defense team laid out a proposed bail package for their client, why he should be released pending trial. And they explained why his actions over the last 6 months point toward cooperation, not avoidance. They also call out the government for seemingly making things more difficult than they had to be. His team writes, quote, "Through counsel, Mr. Combs promptly told the government that he had voluntarily come to New York, offered to tell them specifically where he was, and offered to turn himself in at the appropriate time. Even though Mr. Combs came to New York, authorized his lawyers to tell the government of his location, and offered to self-surrender, the government effected an arrest last evening. This, we know, is the government's right. However, that he traveled to New York to self-surrender is also something the court should consider." So what is this bail package that the defense outlines? Well, here are some of the main points. One, a $50 million bond co-signed by Combs, his mother, his sister, the mother of his eldest daughter, and his 3 adult sons. That $50 million would be secured by the equity in Combs' Miami home. The appraised value of that home on Star Island is $48 million. So in other words, this is what he's saying. You can secure this. You can know that I'm not going to flee the country. I'm not going to break the bail conditions. I'm putting this home up. The defense says that Combs paid off the remaining mortgage, $18 million, so he could use it to secure a bond. The equity in his mother's home in Miami could also be used as collateral. And the letter goes on to say that Combs' travel would be restricted to the Southern District of Florida and the Southern District of New York. Combs apparently surrendered his passport to his attorneys right after the raids on his home, and several of his family members, including his children, have surrendered their passports too. Combs' counsel says he is currently working on selling his private plane, so he wouldn't be able to just jet off to some exotic locale that has no extradition with the United States. In the bail package information, it's also revealed that Combs wants to be under house arrest and would agree to GPS monitoring. The letter from Combs' attorneys also fires back at the assistant U.S. attorneys working on the case, saying they reached out to him in the days before the raids but never got any reply. And then on March 25th, agents swooped in with a big show of force, which the attorneys insist was unnecessary. The filing also goes into Combs' philanthropic works, including his work with the Boys and Girls Club of America, his donations to open a charter school in New York, and his work fundraising to get PPE for frontline workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. At the end of the document, the defense team states Sean Combs has never evaded, avoided, eluded, or run from a challenge in his life. He will not start now. As he has handled every hardship, he will meet this case head on. He will work hard to defend himself, and he will prevail. Now, the prosecution had a different view. So the prosecution team also sent a letter to the judge.
A deeper level of wrongdoing. Then extending the sentence becomes a real possibility. And Diddy knows that once the prosecution gets momentum, they don't stop. People are saying Diddy hasn't been the same since these rumors started spreading inside the prison. He's quieter. He's restless. He's pacing more. He's snapping at staff. He's asking his lawyers for updates nonstop because he knows what's at stake. The idea of more years, more time, more isolation, it's eating him alive. This is the part of a legal downfall nobody talks about. When the sentence is handed down, you think the worst is over. But for Diddy, it's clear the worst might just be beginning. If the judge truly believes this new evidence changes the entire picture, then Diddy might be facing a future even darker than the one he's living in right now. His entire fate is hanging in the balance. One decision from the judge, and his life behind bars could stretch even longer. And the fear he's feeling right now? It's real. And it's only getting worse. And that's exactly the type of situation where a judge says, actually, we're increasing the sentence. And let's be real, the prosecution would love this. They've been after him for months. They've been building a bigger case. They've been collecting statements from people who are suddenly very eager to talk. If disturbing new evidence really just landed, then trust me, the prosecution is pushing hard behind the scenes to convince the judge to extend the punishment. Diddy knows this. His inner circle knows this. Hollywood knows this. This rumor didn't come out of nowhere. It came from people who know things. People who are already preparing for the possibility that Diddy won't be getting out anytime soon, and might not get out at all for a very, very long time. And the tone around Diddy right now? It's fear. Straight fear. Because once a judge starts reconsidering a sentence, the outcome rarely goes in the defendant's favor. If anything, they tighten the screws even harder. Diddy is learning that the legal system isn't done with him. Not even close. And this disturbing new evidence? It might be the thing that finally seals his fate.